Say group. Boy, I know more than Alice.
See, I'm too damn emotional, right?
Yeah, Alice was crying over here.
That was some good time.
I know. It made so much of my life with her badass.
I was bad.
She was bad when we were coming
I was
on.
bad. I said that though.
No, you did.
Yes, I did.
She went to prom.
Saying it doesn't necessarily
She was 13
indicate
years
how
old. We went
the
8th
level
grade.
of badness you
She
were.
went to prom with a senior.
I know.
And he looked old as I don't know what.
They had a beard, smoking cool cigarettes.
I think they went on the bus too. Did y'all go to the prom on the bus?
No.
You smoking cool cigarettes?
Yeah, he was.
And he had a process.
He did. What kind of ghetto shit?
I know. We didn't even hang out with no guys that had processes. Alice done found a Negro that got a process.
Is we ready?
My mom was just too much.
Tony.
So we ready?
Yeah, it's rolling. It's recording, so y'all can begin.
Oh, wow.
Put my dirty laundry out there. Don't let me stop.
Alice, come over here.
Okay.
Should I do this or should I do just one side?
One side.
One side. Okay.
I saw it in the camera.
All right. So, give me your name.
My name is Jutta Browder.
Okay, Jutta Browder. Tell me about some of your fond memories of that time where you were part of a group called the Secretaries. Am I correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so tell me something about the Secretaries.
Wow, it seemed like it was just a lifetime, but it really only lasted for maybe about 3 or 4 years. It was from the time we were like 12 to about 15 or 16 years old.
So you're telling me that 12-year-olds were involved in a music movement?
Yes.
And so tell me something about your partners that were part of the Secretaries.
It was rather phenomenal. What the partners were people who I had been friends with maybe from the youngest as 3 years old. We all went to the same grammar school. Some of us did. Some of them went to other schools. Only about maybe 2 or 3 went to other schools. But we had spent our primary years together, maybe every single moment together during those years.
Wow.
We were in school together. We went to birthday parties together. We knew each other's relatives. These are like 9 or 10 girls, and we spent a lot of time together. So our relationship was formed even before we started this social experience with these other people who were in these organizations, these groups, such as our group.
And this was on what side of Chicago?
The South Side.
South Side Chicago.
South Side. Yeah.
All right. So growing up, when you guys started doing this, you became very popular. Am I correct?
We did. Well, we didn't know we were popular, but we knew that people wanted to be us or do what we were doing, and that it was only a chosen, that's a term, that's really kind of funny, but it was only a chosen few who were part of these organizations.
Got it. So are there some significant people that you guys ran into during that time? Like, yeah. I know, I hear that Michelle Obama is familiar with the Secretaries. Am I correct?
It's just an inside joke that I tell people that because I know she was raised in South Shore. She went to Whitney Young. I'm confident, almost 98% confident that she's heard of a group called the Secretaries or the Doctors and the detectives. All those people were part of Ebony Jensen were part of an organization that mostly all teenagers during that time, and Michelle Obama and I are the same age. During that time, if you lived in the proximity of Chicago and you went to particular high schools, you were aware of these social organizations.
You knew about it. Okay, let's digress a little bit. Tell me something about that time period. Tell me about the clothing.
Well, there were lots of groups, so all groups wanted to be identified, and there were performance groups too. So not only were they social, one of the draws, or one of the main draws actually, was a performance. So you performed at a party in front of hundreds, or it could be a numerous amount of people there. So at one point of the party, the groups were going to be called on to perform. So the attire was really important because you were on a stage, right? So, but what was really common back then, a lot of people wore T-shirts, and they had decals on them. So they may have their name, or the name of their group, or their name on the back, their own personal name on the back, and the name of their group on the front. Well, it was really important to the secretaries that we not follow this trend, because we wanted to be ladies and we wanted to be sophisticated. So you never saw us with shirts or T-shirts with decals on them. What our strategy was, we went to clothing out stores or outlets. It was like we went to very limited and learners back then. These were the name of the stores, and we would buy shirts. But we would buy, if there are 12 secretaries, we would buy 12 shirts, and we would just try to get them in. 3 would wear one color, 3 would wear another color, 3 one. So we would wear shirts, and we would wear, very nice slacks. So that was really important to us. I know.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really important to us.
How important was the music?
The music was everything. The music was the black experience during those times. I mean, because every black person could relate. Parliament, the Funkadelics, Bootsy Collins. I mean, the room would move. You would just be filled with yes and just jubilation. You would just feel the music. So we would listen to that music over and over again and practice routines over and over and never tire of it.
And it wasn't just traditional funk and R&B at that time, huh? There was a new genre that was starting to take a presence.
Actually, initially,
which used funk and R&B.
Yes.
Right?
Thank you. It did. When I was 12 and 13, we were just using the regular tracks of the regular things you would hear on the radio, the regular R&B, the regular funk you would hear on the radio. But when we would be at the parties, the DJs would get more creative with how they would produce the sound. So they would do something called mixing back then. So they would mix the music, right? And then later on, when we got to the latter parts of this particular social scene, the East Coast music came in, and then it melted with all the funk and the Parliament and the East Coast sound, and then it sounded more familiar what people know now as house music.
House music.
And we had parties at the warehouse. And Frankie Knuckles had moved to Chicago from New York, and
Frankie Knuckles was a gay black male DJ, right?
He was a very noted DJ in Chicago. At that time, I just knew he was a DJ at a predominantly gay club. I don't know whether he was or not, but I just knew that he was a DJ at this club. And a lot of people, my peers and a lot of people my age went to this club because you didn't have to be 21 to get in, because they didn't have a liquor license. The warehouse didn't have a liquor license. So a guy named Bob, he gave parties there, and he was one of the persons who was in the doctors. And other people started giving parties there because, it was rather... I wouldn't say it's simplistic, but you wouldn't have to go through the process of, of any stringent guidelines or restrictions, because they didn't have a liquor license. So people became more familiar with the music because this East Coast influence came in, and it was Frankie Knuckles, and there were other influences too.
Sure.
Maybe people were just going back and forth from New York to Chicago, and they started bringing that music more to Chicago, and then the funk and all that got all melted in, and now we know it as house music.
So tell me about some of the groups, some of the other groups, the clubs, the male and female groups.
There were lots of groups there. It was mainly male and female groups. There, to my knowledge, there was no male and female groups.
Okay.
Although the secretaries people may not know this little small fact, was a male and female group.
Oh.
We had a male manager. His name was Vernell. And he was our manager. So,
And so Vernell's role was what for the secretary?
Vernell's role was he ensured our safety and transport to the parties, and he was a part of the organization. People knew him as a part of the secretaries. Now, I don't know if he ever referred to himself as a secretary. I know he affiliates with the organization, but I don't think he refers to himself as a secretary.
Okay.
And he came middle into our success. So we were pretty successful when he came along, a little bit successful. And yeah, that's a little small fun fact.
And so tell me about the doctors.
The doctors were paramount in this social revolution, because they kind of sparked a lot of people's interest, male and female, because of the technique of how they dance. They were all very handsome young black boys, I should say, because they were in high school at the time. And the girls liked them because they were cute, and the boys liked them because they were like, hey, I want to do that. And so they were a phenomenon. And they were like the pioneers, but they weren't the primary pioneers. The primary pioneers, as I always say, was the Bazees, because the doctors were a branch from what the Bazees were.
Okay.
And Arthur Bailey created the Bazees as a dance group, and from my understanding, he was one of the members of the Soul Train group. Not group, but he was on the Soul Train program when it was on Channel 26 in Chicago.
Ah, okay. So the doctors has the DNA of his organization.
Yeah, because they had a lot of admiration for Arthur Bailey and the Bazees. They really liked what they were doing, and like how we got involved because we liked what the doctors were doing. They too got involved because they liked what the Bazees were doing. They were just in a high school setting, and the Bazees were actually a little older than the doctors were.
Right.
So they got, like I said, the males and the females going, and they were younger.
So tell me about how you guys leverage your interacting with each other socially to make money.
We just stepped in. The doctors embraced us. They were like, hey, so, you guys are the secretaries. We're like, yeah, we're the secretaries. And so they were giving parties. We're like, we're going to give a party too. So, we just figured it out. I mean, at 12 years old, we figured out how to give our first party.
Nice.
And
with your parents' support?
Yes, our parents were always supportive, but our parents were supportive before we were even involved in the secretaries. We used to go roller skating together. Our parents used to take turns. Every parent took turns in driving us places and doing what we wanted. Taking us to the movies or taking us to other. When we just used to socialize with our school, those school parties. So our parents were always supportive, and so they were just like, this is just a next step. But this kind of involved money. I don't even know if our parents thought about it. They knew we were charging at the door, and they just collected money on our behalf. At the end of the party, they would count the money. And then after the third or fourth party, we were like, well, we need to secure this money. So we put it in a bank account. And then we had to start making decisions around our money.
Right. So your venues were larger?
Yeah, our venues
more
became
extravagant,
larger.
more elaborate?
I don't know if they were extravagant because it was always the draw of the group. And there were certain locations always.
Mm-hmm. And what were those locations?
We used to do parties at the Park Palladium, which is a very noted place for black entertainment in Chicago back in the 40s and the 50s. And we used to do parties at...
the Warehouse?
No, well, not as a group.
Okay.
The warehouse came along kind of after the groups had dismantled.
Okay.
But the same following went on to those places. But there were places like we gave our first party at Dorchester Commons, I think was the name of it. It's near our neighborhood where we grew up. But at the time, we were looking for halls, and that was what we could afford. I think it was $500.
Wow.
And 12-year-olds, we paid dues. We had to pay dues for the party, to rent the room, and we had to pay dues because we all got to match an outfit together. And at that time,
So there were some real expenses involved.
Yeah, there was expensive involved. I remember we had pleated skirts with a scarf to match, and we did a performance and everything, because that was big. I mean, not only do you have the party, the host of the party has to do a presentation. They have to do a dance presentation. And then if you invite other people to come along, like you may put on we used to call them pluggers and their invitations. If you ask those people to come along, they would probably do a performance too, because that's where they're on the plugger, because people want to see them perform. And I just remember, I mean, we would do parties at a school called St. Albie's that was really noted for their events at that time. And that was real big. I mean, hundreds of kids.
Right.
And people just used to go wild. And that's just amazing to me. It's kind of like, seeing the Beatles. I mean, kids used to just go crazy over the performances, but really over the male performances. I guess, because I was performing it at that time, I was a female performer. I don't know. Maybe they went crazy over the females or whatever.
But it was definitely, your performances didn't look anything like some of the performances that you see today from young ladies, with a lot of rail grabbing, twerking, and things of that nature.
Because when we used to give a party, at least one parent would be in the room. Somebody's parents.
So you had to keep it clean.
Right. So we were always looking for the approval of our parents. So that would be no. And then at that time, I don't know if it was a good or bad thing. The males in our life had a lot of judgment. So they were raised a certain way to believe that women should act a certain way. And it was understood what that way was. So we wanted the attention and the affection. I shouldn't say affections, but we didn't want to be excluded from that. So, if at that time it would have been a shone upon if a woman was gyrating or grabbing body parts or something like that. That just wouldn't have been accepted at that time. I mean, that was just that kind of history we lived in, and we all went to parochial school. So not only did we have the influences of our parents, we had the influences of nuns and priests and all these people telling us what good girls and bad girls did. And people believed it then. And so people act accordingly.
And so you guys did.
And so they acted it, whether they were in the school setting or whether we were in the social setting, it didn't matter. Those rules still applied. So that's what we just did.
So you tell me the music was very important. So from what I understand is that there was a young group of young DJs.
Yes.
That kind of cut their teeth at your parties.
Yes. And they were everything.
Let's talk about them.
Yeah, they were everything. So, I mean, if you couldn't get Kirk Townsend at your party, you just didn't have a party. I don't even know what the other options were. Actually, I mean, at that particular time, and he had to be a young person himself. I mean, he was a little older than us, but I mean, he wasn't that much older than we were. But that really, I don't know if he even put that information on I keep calling them pluggers because at that time, invitations, pluggers, that's
flyers.
What they were called,
yeah.
Flyers, pluggers, whatever. And of who would be our DJ. And you had to pay, and it was not cheap. They were, they demanded what they were worth at that time. But I just remember him, Kirk Townsend. I wish I could recall another name because there was so many parties going on back those days. Of course, there had to be other options. He couldn't do all the parties, but he was pretty dominant back in those days, and very important to all our development. You know, he used to play the music for our performances, you know, and play them to our instruction. I think he even used to host the Mendel talent shows. Those used to be huge. And everybody used to go to the Mendel talent shows. And just a lot of things went on that was very special to us. I mean, you know, as an adult, yeah, I can look back and say that, but we used to think everybody lived like that, and everybody did.
Tell me about some of the guys that now are receiving some global recognition for house music and making sure they keep that genre alive.
Well, I remember a few. I don't know all of the ones that are involved now, but there's a few now who they were just part of the scene. They may have been around the DJ stand at that time in the primary years. And I'm talking about the primaries. I'm not talking about, the middle or, where they are now. They may have been around the DJ stand at that time, but I don't remember them being a dominant force as a DJ, but they were probably learning and they were probably spinning records, at that time. But I think they were influenced by the reaction they get from the crowd, how you move the crowd and to see all that. So I'm confident that era influenced them.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure they gained something from how everybody operated, because at that time, how you operated your business was pretty transparent. So as I mentioned, Kirk Townsend was a big DJ back then, and I'm sure how he operated his business was pretty transparent as how we operated giving parties. It was pretty transparent. So if you were interested and had the capacity to do it, everybody was doing it the same way. So
tell me, give me some general thoughts about when you reminisce about those time periods. I mean, tell me what some endearing, lasting memories and qualities that you've taken from that period.
It's just special. Every time I see somebody from that era, like I saw somebody tonight I hadn't seen, since I was 15. You get those feelings all over again, and you start talking about people you knew, and things that happened back then. And it happens with every single person that I haven't seen since I was 15. And we live in a city like Chicago. It's big, but kind of like not that big, but it's big. But it's odd that, we haven't seen each other for like 40 years. Or, and we all have these endearing and, heartfelt feelings about those moments, about how we felt in those moments. I mean, every time I run into somebody from that era, they have the same exact feelings. And they may not have been in a group. Now, I was in a group that was pretty well noted, that a lot of people knew of, and was quite popular, especially to be a female group. Now, there were a lot of popular male groups, but I would have to say, for a couple years running, we were the most sought and popular group as a female. And it was tough. Because we didn't have the support sometimes of a lot of other females out who may have been wanting to do the same thing, which is unfortunate. But, at that time, that's just the way it was. But for me, I just like having that connection at this stage of my life with people who I run into, because that era was so special that me and that person can communicate without saying the words. We don't have to relive it. We don't have to say exactly what happened. We just understand. And we look in each other's eyes and we be like, yeah, And it's before it became a commodity. Like now house music is a commodity.
Right.
Now, people dance and jack their body, whatever. But we were living that experience before that was even a name was attached to that. And before these people knew anything about what we were doing on the south side, really on the southeast side of Chicago, because it's a little quadrant. It's not, now it's like the whole south side, but at that time it was just a little quadrant because you had to go to certain schools that were in that particular district.
And if you were outside that area,
you were aware of it.
You were aware of it, but you weren't intimately connected with it.
No, you weren't involved in it. Because of the fact that groups were really formed with people who were going to school together. So it would be rare that somebody would go to different schools and have a group. Now, it could happen. It could happen. But, you know, the doctors mainly all went to Mendel. You know, our creation, we all mainly went to St. Felicity's together. And so that's how, you know, most groups form. They had some type of connection. They went to grammar school or high school together, or maybe lived in the same neighborhood on the same block or something to that effect. Not to say that if people live in different areas or went to different schools, they couldn't have a group. It's just the commonality was really important. So,
you know, in the African American community, we have a word for sometimes we like to label people who have a very unique experience than many others. We'll call them bougie. So were you guys bougie? Based upon today's definition of bougie?
I think that we were looked at by people who felt like they weren't included in the group. It did cause problems for people who maybe didn't go to the schools that were always associated with these groups. They felt excluded, you know, and sometimes they tried to form their own group, and unfortunately it just didn't stick.
It didn't work.
Because another thing, even if you formed a group in high school, usually people who, at that time, back in history, if you went to parochial school, more than likely you went to parochial grammar school. So people had connections going back. So it's hard to, if you didn't have those two foundations, to get connected. And, you know, we couldn't verbalize that. We didn't know that and verbalize that during that time, but it was what it was, you know. And we thought we were welcoming because new groups came all the time, but it was only those who could sustain. The ones who sustained had a better business and work ethic, in my opinion. You know, but a lot of groups came and went. And if you did it exclusively for the social recognition, they didn't last. Ours lasted because we were all friends and close before that.
Right.
It wasn't the secretaries that made us close. We were close forming the secretaries, and that's probably true of the doctors and the Ebony Gents. The Ebony Gents, they all from the same neighborhood. They all grew up together. You know, they all played together before they even formed this group. So I think it's the prior connections that made the groups more successful.
So do you have, do you maintain some really close relationships from...
all the secretaries who I was in my group with, we're all still friends, and it's been 40 years. So.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, I don't know, there's nothing that could break us apart now, so we're good for another 40. So we'll be good for another 80 years, you know.
That's great to hear.
So.
Have any other thoughts, Ms. Browder?
I don't have any other thoughts. You know, of course I have a lot to say. There's with so many experiences, but socially I am who I am from that foundation. You know, I am who I am. You know, I love partying still, you know, connecting with other people. And it came from that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, brother. I was about to have a moment.
I feel real professional.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh my God.
I feel like Brian Gumble.
Better than Brian. Better than Brian.
Been like, what you hollering, y'all?
So that was the warm up, right? Now y'all ready to do it? That was the warm up, right? Y'all ready to do it now? I ain't hit record. I thought.